few days, I guess. I figured I'd go ahead and start back up. What if Naruto was an outsider? I was sleeping on this series for a bit. I'm finna go ahead and start up instantly. Honestly, I don't have any announcements to make. So, yeah. After the meeting, I quickly made my way towards the Hokage Tower with one goal in mind: to gain access to the diplomatic team that would travel to the land of snow tomorrow morning. How would I How I would do this remained unknown to me, but I knew my father. I knew how he thought and how to pull at his heart strings. While the task for a normal civilian would be near impossible, for me, "You may come in," I heard a voice shout from the inside of the Hokage office. Opening the door, my father peered up at me from beneath a massive pile of paper that had been accrued, I don't know how to say that, across his desk. "Naruto, how have you been?" I smiled brightly, placing the same facade onto my being as before with Danto. "You must be pretty busy, because I have hardly seen you at the house lately. I've been studying a lot, with other people in my previous class. No reason to get rusty just 'cause it's summer break." "Right." Minato chuckled at my words as he pushed some of the papers out of the way to see, so he could see me. "I doubt even he knows I graduated. So what do I owe the pleasure? What, can't I just stop by and see my dad every now and again?" "I know you better than that. You'd only come here if you wanted something, so spread it out," Minato said with humor in his voice. "I must be more like him than I know." "Oh, okay. I sighed as I approached the window overlooking the village. "I just wanted to know if I could leave the village for a while." Leave the village?
What's up, world?
Bro.
It's your girl, Money Long. Make sure you
Sick of
check
this
out my new
ad.
single album.
Straight advertising some dumb shit, whatever. Anyhow. Leave the village? Why would you want to do that? He honestly looked surprised at my request, but decided to hear me out. "I've been working really hard lately, and I was thinking of different ideas for vacation, so then I thought that maybe I could leave the village for a while." I smiled brightly as I imagined traveling to different places and meeting different people. I've always wanted to travel, so I could maybe couple that into my vacation time. Minato saw how brightly I smiled when I spoke of traveling, and smiled himself. "I suppose it's only fair. Your sister is actually leaving the village today on her first sea ride mission. Like I said before, it's only fair that you can leave the village as well." I turned to Minato with bright eyes and a wide smile. "Really? I can go anywhere I want?" "Now hold on there. You're going to have to travel with some people because you can't protect yourself from bandits," Minato said, while holding his hands up in an attempt to calm me down. "Travel with people? Who would I be traveling with?" "A diplomatic team, led by Shibi Aburame, and later by a different Jonin. They're heading towards the land of snow for diplomatic reasons, but on the way there, they'll be staying in the land of hot water. It's an easy and laid-back mission that's perfect for your vacation," Minato said, expecting some form of complaint like his sister normally shouted, but was surprised when I only smiled and nodded. "That sounds perfect. I've always wanted to see the land of hot water." "Thanks, Dad," I said as I hugged him tightly, much to his surprise. "When are we leaving?" I asked once we separated. "Tomorrow morning at dawn. I'll let them know that you'll be attending their little voyage," Minato said with a smile of his own. "I hope you have a fantastic time." "Not going to be home tonight?" I asked as I opened the door to leave. "Too much of this paperwork. I think I'll just sleep on the office couch tonight," Minato replied, grumbled, chuckling at his expense. I went to close the door. "Later, Dad." But once the door was fully opened, I dropped the persona and returned to my cold visage. Step 1 complete. Seat change. "So tomorrow morning, huh?" I thought as I sat on an empty bench in the dead of night. At the dead of night, in one of Konoha's massive parks, a single light shined down onto me while the crickets chirped loudly around me. It was surreal, really. Finally, I would be able to leave the village, but a heavy cost hung over my head for me to do so. Was this truly the right thing to be doing? I asked myself that every single day. But I still couldn't find the answer. There likely wasn't one of my There likely wasn't one for my dilemma. At least not now. I'm sure if I grow old and look back on everything I've done and what I'm going to do, then the answer would be as clear as day. But for now, it remained out of reach. Naruto? I turned my head to see a familiar face walking down the stone path. What are you doing here? Hello, Saya. The raven-haired girl stood just inside of the light of the lamp and radiated its beam down around us, just taking a little walk. Oh? The girl stood there awkwardly as she looked down onto me. Can I? I nodded my head as Saya sat down onto the bench next to me. We stayed quiet for a while, the two of us simply enjoying the noise that nature made at that night. Thanks. I looked over to her with confusion in my eyes. For the other day. Anyone would have done the same for the last Uchiha. Saya tightened her fists at my words, but her eyes betrayed sadness. No, most people avoid me like the plague. I remained silent, simply listening to her words. They see me as the prodigy that will lift them to new heights, a thing that can be ogled at from afar, but never approached. I was simply giving her a sideways glance while she stared at the ground before her. Why am I telling him this? I've never told anyone anything before. It's hard living with all the expectations of those around you. They believe that you're their savior, but in reality, you're in pain. Saya's onyx eyes widened when she heard my words. I'm not in pain. Who do you think? Saya exclaimed as she turned to me. It's in your eyes. She went quiet when I said those words. Those cold eyes you hold may shield your emotions from others, but underneath, I then looked forward into the darkness as a slight pang of emotion rose from my stomach. The pain lingers. The Uchiha didn't say anything at first. She simply stared at me before slowly looking forwards once again. A breeze swept over us, shaking the leaves from the trees around us. I think you and I are more alike than we'd like to admit. Saya looked to me with a combination of confusion and sadness, always overshadowed by the people around us, glanced over towards a brighter light. What do you know? You still have a father, you still have a sister. They both still love you and you are alive, Saya shouted as she stood in anger, but I knew this was just a defensive mechanism to hide her pain, her fear. They are, but when I look at them, I realize how different we are from one another. Look at me, I said as she looked at my body. I can never perform jutsu. I can never walk up walls. I can never breathe fire. I shut my eyes and sighed before standing. I'm sorry, Saya. I shouldn't have said anything. Have a nice night, and good luck on your mission tomorrow. Saya didn't say anything as I walked away, and I couldn't tell what she was thinking, since her black hair covered her eyes from view. Why did I even begin spilling my emotions out to her in the first place? We were somewhat alike, that's true. At least she can fly like the rest of the birds. My walk continued down the path until I stopped and saw a hooded man standing beneath the street lamp before me. He didn't move from his spot, but I knew what was to come. Soon another man appeared under the lamp behind me. We stood in our spots for a moment, waiting for the other to move. The man in front of me dashed towards me while producing a knife from his jacket. Jutting his weapon towards me, I moved in the side while grabbing onto his wrist before I could disarm him. The second man was upon me with a bat with a wire wrapped around the end. We both ducked, but the man with the knife landed a punch, which sent me stumbling backwards. On instinct, I rolled to the side as the bat slammed into the stone next to me. I jumped forwards and rammed my shoulder into the larger man, but still, this was enough to make him stumble backwards. The bat fell to the ground, and I quickly picked it up and swung it at the attacker with the knife. Barbed wire and wood met flesh, making a resounding crack. The knife-wielding man fell to the ground with a scream, but his shout stopped when I slammed the bat into his head as hard as I could. Not stopping my advance, I threw the bat at the other man, who managed to dodge the attack. However, on my way to engage him, I grabbed the knife and went in for the killing blow. But what surprised me was the charge. My charge was met by a kunai slung straight at me. Biting the inside of my cheek, I summoned a wind blade that deflected the kunai, much to the attacker's surprise. I plunged the knife into his neck, making him fall over in a gurgling mess. Breathing heavily, I sighed at the carnage around me, but then my instinct kicked into high gear. My eyes lit up into a purple hue as I glanced behind me to see a woman swinging a sword down onto me. On instinct, a blade of wind deflected the sword, and before she could recover, I blinked beside her to deliver a blade of wind to her neck. Her head fell to the ground, making me stare down at the carnage around me. With everyone confirmed dead, I went to work disposing of the bodies, unknowing that a pair of eyes disappeared into the night. Scene change. "So you're Naruto, I presume?" A man with shaded glasses asked as I approached the diplomatic group standing. As I approached the diplomatic group standing under the gate leading out of the village. The sun was just beginning to creep over the edge of the horizon, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. This must be Shibi Aburame, the Jonin tasked with protecting us. The Jonin tasked with protecting us. I nodded my head with a large smile adorning my face. "That's me. You must be Shibi-sama." "Indeed, I am, but please, just Shibi." "Sure thing." My eyes hovered over the 3 other people that stood behind Shibi. None of them were shinobi garb, but cloaks that made them stand out as diplomats of the Land of Fire. A few of them looked at me with disdain for a reason that I could only imagine related to my heritage. I apologize for all of the ads. Simply, I do not have premium, and I don't like wasting money. A few of them looked at me with disdain for a reason that I could only imagine related to my heritage. It would seem that even officials as high up held anger towards my existence. "Are we going to walk?" "Are you joking, boy?" "Of course we aren't going to walk," one of the diplomats said in annoyance, making Shibi glance at him in confusion. Clearly, the Jonin was unaware of the anger that some people felt towards a parasite like myself. "We have a carriage on its way as we speak." "Oh, well, that's good," I responded with a little less enthusiasm. The man made an audible humph before shaking his head. Walking, some son of a Hokage you are." I frowned at his words, but I remained quiet. My blood has been a topic of heated debate amongst the villagers since my birth. Like many things, people like to argue over political and social things, but this was by far the most talked about subject in the village. Why people hated or liked me varied from person to person. Some saw me as a charity case and believed that the Hokage was only taking care of me because I was blood-related. Others viewed me as a parasite that was latching onto the stainless image that they held of Minato and Huey. As for a normal person living within these walls, they saw me as the son of the Hokage and left it at that. But these voices are rarely heard amongst the more pronounced voices within the village. Indeed it is often the silent majority that are left just like their title suggests, silent. Shibi was clearly intrigued by the diplomat's attitude towards me, but stayed silent as a horse-drawn carriage approached us. After appearing from one of the many streets leading into the plaza that served as Konoha's entrance, a Chunin was sitting at the reins, but once the carriage was next to us, he jumped off the wagon and bowed to Shibi. "It's all yours, Shibi-sama." With that, the man left to another mission, or the like. "Now that we're all here, I'd like the 3 of you to introduce yourselves to our new guest," Shibi said in a toneless voice. The first diplomat that spoke made an audible humph before looking away from me. "Kajime is my name, and I'm the lead diplomat. Don't you dare embarrass us in front of the parliament in the Land of Snow," Kajime said before stepping up into the carriage. He was a portly man who had brown hair and pale skin. "And my name is Nao." Nao. That's a really hard name to say for me. "The co-leader of this diplomatic mission. Be on your best behavior, and we should return home before you know it," the only woman of the group said. But Nao, it's such a hard word. It's such a hard name. But Nao was clearly agitated that I was here. Nao climbed up into the carriage and sat next to Kajime in the booth. The woman was older, with black hair and purple eyes. I sighed as the final member of the diplomatic team approached me. But to my surprise, he held out his hands to me. "Hello, Naruto-kun. I'm known as Shu. to my compatriots. It's a pleasure to meet you, Shu said with a bright smile. The man was younger than the other two, maybe mid-20s if I had to guess, with dark purple and teal dark purple hair, and teal eyes. Grabbing a hold of his hands, I nodded my head with a smile of my own. The pleasure is mine. Shu nodded his head and climbed up into the carriage. If that's all, then please take a seat inside the carriage, and we should be on our way, Shibi said, as he climbed up onto the front of the carriage and took the reins of the two horses. I glanced inside the fancy carriage and looked up to the seat next to Shibi. Mind if I ride up front with you? I'd prefer the fresh air while we travel. Shibi furrowed his brow at my question, but nodded his head as I climbed up to the seat next to him. Thanks. It'd be more comfortable if you sat in the carriage. We won't reach the land of hot springs for about 10 hours, Shibuya questioned as I strapped my backpack to the top of the carriage, where the diplomat's luggage had already been prepared. All the more reason to see the world around me. Can't see much when I'm stuck inside, now can I? I asked as I plopped down next to the stoic man who simply shrugged at my words. Besides, I'm sure the diplomats have plenty of planning to do, and my presence would only be a distraction, if that's what you want. With that, he beckoned the horses to pull us along and into the wilderness beyond the walls. We stayed silent for a long time as I placed a cheery outer persona onto my being to throw Shibi off. I was very happy that the stoic Aburame was the person that would escort us to the land of hot springs. His silent nature was preferred to someone more boisterous. About 5 hours had passed, and I was taking a short nap atop the carriage when Shibi finally spoke for the first time since we left. That's a very nice jacket and scarf you have. I peered over to the shaded man, but he kept his eyes pointed forwards as we passed the thick forests around us. My hood was down and the scarf lowered, but I would never leave home without these articles of clothing unless I had to. But are you not hot underneath all those clothes? About as warm as you are, I responded as I pulled slightly at my scarf. Shibi nodded his head in understanding, but I decided to voice this silent understanding. These clothes make me feel comfortable when I'm out and about, like I can steer away from the prying eyes of those that don't think highly of me. The diplomats was Shibi's first interaction with those that saw me in the negative light, but this was understandable. A clan head like him, who was never met me before, mind you, would never have heard of something so belittling as this. It was underneath him of someone of such high status, even if he doesn't feel that way. Shibi nodded his head as the sound of the horse hooves overtook us once again. It wasn't too long after Kajime stuck his head out of the window to say something. You wouldn't mind if we stopped for some food, would you? The rest of us are growing rather hungry. Shibi nodded his head as he looked around. All around us were thick woods as far as the eye could see, but Shibi knew this route very well and knew something was coming up. There's a dumpling shop coming up. Does that work? Shibi asked. Kajime disappeared for the moment before sticking his head back. That's perfect. And true to his words, about 10 minutes later, a wooden house appeared with smoke flowing out of its chimney. 3 wooden tables sat in the dirt in front of the building, with 4 chairs surrounding each table. Shibi pulled the carriage over and strapped the horse to a wooden pole. It feels good to stretch the legs, the diplomats filled out of the carriage as I hopped off the front. Let's sit outside. We've been cramped in the carriage for the last 5 hours, and could use some fresh air, Nao stated as the 3 diplomats sat down at one of the tables. Shibi, please join us. Once you're done strapping down the horses, we'd love some of your input on the meeting we're going to have in the land of snow. The older Aburame glanced at me, but I simply smiled and nodded my head for him to sit with the group. I don't know how much help I would be, Shibi said as he sat at the table. Nonsense, you're a Jonin, so I'm sure. I entered the building. As the words left Kajime's mouth, a waiter passed by me as I entered the building, and I found 2 more small tables inside said building. Deciding that this was a good place as any, I sat down at one of the tables and looked at the menu that was built into the wall above. The door leading to the kitchen in the back. There wasn't anyone else There wasn't anybody else here, save for the people that ran the business, of course. As the waiter came back in with my companion's orders, he stopped at my table and notepad in hand. "What would you like today?" the man asked as he flipped over a piece of paper on his notepad. "A green tea and the pork dumplings." The man wrote down my order and was about to leave the back room when a voice made itself known to us. I'll have the same as the kid." I glanced over to the entrance of the building to see two figures walking in. They had straw hats that covered their faces and black cloaks with red clouds dotted across them. I furrowed a brow at the obviously taller and loud-spoken man. He had a large bandaged item strapped to his back, which looked extremely heavy. The waiter nodded his head and looked to the shorter, more silent, cloaked man in question. "Just tea," he softly spoke. Oh man, these ads are really starting to piss me off a little bit. Sorry. "Just tea," he softly spoke. They moved towards me and sat at my table. "Hey there, sport. You're awfully young to be traveling around on your own," the larger man said as he tipped his hat upwards somewhat to reveal blue skin and a toothy grin. "You must be traveling with those diplomats outside, if I had to take a guess." My eyes narrowed as I looked at the blue man. "Those are some dangerous eyes you have there. You're no normal kid, are you?" "What do you want?" I asked, my persona completely disappearing. This made the blue man grin widely as he heard my cold tone take over. Clearly, he knew he was right about his earlier assumption. "Couldn't tell you myself. It was my companion that wanted to talk to someone from Konoha," the blue man said as he watched the waiter take the food and drinks out of the group sitting outside. I looked over to the quiet man sitting to my right and watched as he lifted his hat to greet his eyes with my own, the cold onyx eyes that closely resembled my own. "There's been a rumor that I want verified," the black-haired man said in a dead tone, much like my own. A girl by the name of Saya Uchiha is said to have been attacked not long ago. Is this true?" I stared at the man as I thought of the options before me, but eventually sighed. These men were extremely powerful, and simply wanted to know some common knowledge that happened within our village. True to his words, the rumor of a mysterious man attacking the last Uchiha has spread throughout the village, even if my father didn't want it to. Sorry. Where was I? How it happened, I'm not sure, but it did. That's what I've heard, yes. Rumor has someone by the name of the Phantom of the Leaf attacked her within the Uchiha compound not long ago. The stoic man grew 10 times colder as the words left my mouth, making me slightly scared of my own health as well. The waiter came by and placed our food in front of us before leaving us to our own business. Does anyone know why he did this? No, but some people have said that he was hired by her older brother for some reason. Of course, nobody has said this, but I wanted to see these people's reaction to my statements. As I was beginning to learn of people who were. I don't know much because the Hokage has been keeping this rather quiet, but like all things, information tends to find its way onto the lips of the people. The man didn't respond. He simply remained quiet, as he thought over the implications of what I said. "I see. Thank you for your cooperation," the man said, one last sip of his tea before standing. "Come, we're leaving." The blue-skinned man looked disappointed, but quickly ate the rest of his food before standing as well. "Waiter, please put his bill onto ours." Once the bill was paid, the black-haired man bowed before leaving the building. "You have good taste for food, kid. Next time we meet, you should recommend something else to try," the blue-skinned man said as he walked out of the building as well, leaving me to myself and the still untouched food in front of me. Sorry. That was strange. I thought as I began eating my dumplings, but I did learn something rather interesting today. A smile played across my lips at the implications this could have in the future. Oh, I apologize for that noise. Something fell. Scene change. Oh. Well, I suppose this is the end of what if Naruto was an outsider. I hope you enjoyed this part, and if you didn't, well, that's your problem, isn't it? I'll see you all next time, and, I guess I hope you enjoyed. I don't really know. And, until the next episode.